In the meantime, as we say, balancing a lot of news and politics going on in the world today, we're going to turn back to Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president. Earlier, we were discussing Sanders' embrace of the Pope and the church leaders' call to action on climate change this week. Also of note with Bernie Sanders, though, are the nearly 5,000 people who attended one of his events in Denver last night. That's one of the biggest campaign rallies of the presidential campaign, of anyone's presidential campaign so far. You can see, look at that wide shot there, 5,000 people showing up to see him in Denver. Bring the panel back in here. This is becoming a theme with Bernie Sanders' campaign. I think they had events in South Carolina, in Nevada. They had to move the locations because of too much interest. I was up in Burlington, Vermont, his hometown. It is city about 40,000 people for his announcement. I think they had 5,500 people. They just opened up a public park. Huge grassroots interest. The million-dollar question, of course, Caitlin, with all this, I always think back like to Ralph Nader running for president in 2000. He was filling up 15,000-seat arenas, and people were looking at this and saying, wow, this guy's going to get 5, 10, 15% of the vote on election day. There's something big going on there. It translated to 2.7% in the end. So you start to wonder, is this a sign of something broad, or is this a sign that basically every Bernie Sanders supporter in Colorado came to one place yesterday?
I think it's two things. One is that, you know, Democrats haven't had an open race in a long time. I think they're wanting to have this debate, especially to the issues that he's talking about. The other thing is that there's a certain amount of accessibility to his campaign. If you think about it, I mean, Hillary Clinton has been traveling around the country hosting events, but in the beginning they were very small, very, you know, orchestrated, very, you know, designed. His have this feeling of, you know, just come on in. And so I do think for Democrats who want to participate in the process, maybe they don't end up thinking that he's going to be president, but they do want to be involved. I've seen it, you know, especially in New Hampshire, where, you know, Democrats and independents go to Republican events just to scope out the field. I do think there's you know, accessibility to his campaign is important.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Jonathan, do you think he's tapping into, because you can look at the race, the Democratic race, just on the numbers, and you say overall Hillary Clinton's 40, 50 points ahead of him. However, we did also see this week in New Hampshire, there were 2 polls in New Hampshire this week that had Sanders within 10 points of Hillary Clinton there. Now, you could dismiss that and say, he's from Vermont, this is New Hampshire, Connecticut River, there's a lot of overlap right there. But we put him up on the screen right there. I mean, that caught my attention.
And or it could be an outlier. Look, Hillary Clinton is still ahead, but there is no denying that the reason why Bernie Sanders is getting the crowds that he's getting is because his message is tapping into a feeling and an anger and an anxiety within the Democratic Party base that has been there since the financial collapse of 2008. He is speaking their language. He is angry at the banks. He thinks they should be punished. And there are a lot of people who believe that. And so in a political environment, when someone is saying the things that you believe in your head and your heart, of course you're going to go out there and hear that person articulate your feelings. The question is, and your Ralph Nader example is a perfect example, the question is, once it comes time to go to the ballot box and vote, when it goes from a voluntary, hey, let's go see this person speak, to, okay, now I'm actually proactively making a call, it gets to be a little different. You know, 15,000 people showing up for Ralph Nader translated into 2% of the vote, and, you know, George W. Bush presidency.
That's not really the point right now. The point is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with Hillary Clinton. She's not speaking to a pretty significant segment within the Democratic Party. And the interesting thing is that, you know, he's not a big celebrity. He's not an incredibly charismatic speaker. You know, he's Bernie Sanders, and he's showing up, and thousands of people are coming, and Hillary Clinton is going to have to respond to this. She's going to have to deal with it.
Isn't she? It sounds like she is, because I mean, if you the themes that she's stressing, at least in her speeches right now,
she's going to swing farther than she wanted to swing in order to sort of capture that. And I don't think it's really about Election Day. I think it's what happens between now and Election Day that she and her campaign are going to do, the changes that they're going to make that are going to cause her some heartache between now and Election Day.
It's interesting because we were talking about her speech. We were playing some of her speech that she gave yesterday in response to Charleston. One of the themes that she played up in the speech is gun control. The interesting thing there is that Bernie Sanders, we think of him as the most left-wing guy in the world on everything, not on guns. on the issue of guns, Bernie Sanders is sort of a political philosophy. This comes, I think, from being from a rural state, from Vermont, where he thinks his obligation to the sort of the lower income rural population in Vermont is they like their guns, they cherish their guns. He does not want to be seen as threatening their guns, and he wants to instead unite them into this sort of economically progressive. That's his vision of politics. And Hillary, there's an opening there for her to get to his left on that issue.
So now what? And so now the pressure. Everyone keeps talking about how Bernie Sanders is pressuring Hillary Clinton to move to the left on economics and all of this. Well, with that speech, as you're saying, she's putting down pressure on Bernie Sanders. It's going to be incumbent upon us to ask, well, Senator Sanders, well, where are you on gun control? To put him on the spot and make him answer those questions.
It's interesting. Howard Dean, also from Vermont, when he ran in 2004, that was one of the tripwires for him in the Democratic primary as well. He was opposed to gun control. He said, this is a state issue. I don't want New York laws in Vermont.
Well, here's where Martin O'Malley comes in. I mean, there's kind of this primary within the primary of Martin O'Malley, and you know, we just haven't really seen him get, and this is an issue where he saw an opening as well. I mean, he came out with that very strong letter to supporters. So I think that is such a fascinating part of this primary, watching.
But as usual, we don't think of Martin O'Malley till the very end. That's sort of the problem. Anyway, I want to say thanks to this morning's panel, Jonathan Capehart, Katie Packer-Gage, Caitlin Huey-Burns. Appreciate you all being here.